So we find ourselves in this contradictory situation. The world is awash in data because of the data revolution. And yet, there are still many countries that have poor data or where data arrives too late, and too many issues are still barely covered by existing data. So a part of the world is drowning in data, and another part is dying of thirst of data. Now, where do we get data? For government, really, there are about 5 data sources that matter. The first is official statistics. This is data collected by government, and traditionally, government has relied on this data. And official statistics comes from census, surveys, and administrative data. So official statistics are numerical data sets produced by government agencies mainly for administrative purposes. Government data are comprehensive because they attempt to cover as much of the population as possible. Consistent, government agencies have a long-term focus and provide consistent definitions of key measures over time, which is necessary to interpret the most recent estimates. And it is credible. Government agency must meet strict transparency requirements imposed by law and international bodies. So the first kind of official statistics is census data. It is a count for official purposes of a people living in a country and to obtain information such as age, sex, and race. Census is very expensive because it attempts to count everyone in the population. And as such, it is done infrequently. Governments can only afford a census once every 10 years. A survey is a subnational estimate of a given characteristic of the population and are resorted to due to rapid changes in the size and other characteristics of population and the demand for additional detailed data on social, economic, and housing characteristics. So a survey is an attempt to get the pulse of the nation or an attempt to get a handle on some characteristics of the population using a smaller sample. Right? And we're able to use a small sample to represent the general population because we're using a specific scientific method to do that. Administrative data, on the other hand, is data collected by sources external to a statistical agency. They're usually collected routinely on all individuals affected by a particular program. So for instance, if a country has a conditional cash transfer program, which is meant to alleviate poverty, that's usually run by the Social Services Ministry and sometimes assisted by the Ministry of Education. So data is collected about the participants so that they can run the program efficiently. So different ministries with different programs collect data. So it's not just the National Statistics Agency, which usually run the census, or the surveys that collect data. All government agencies collect data. The question is, how well are these data used? Sometimes government agencies, simply after the initial use, forget about the data that they have because they have so much data, but so much unprocessed data as well. The other thing about official statistics is that, as we said, they attempt to be comprehensive. It is important. A census is a count of everybody, but that's a problem because it's expensive. The other challenge that we face is that sometimes there are also not enough data about certain groups of people, not enough data about certain characteristics of the population, despite this effort at comprehensiveness. And gender is one of these things. We lack data about women. We lack data about indigenous populations. And even sometimes we lack data about the urban poor. So there's still much to be done in terms of improving official statistics so that, in fact, everybody is counted and everybody is represented. The second source of data, and this is perhaps the newest source of data that we have, is big data. What is big data? Well, as the name suggests, it's huge. Right? So a formal definition of big data is that they are data sets whose size is beyond the ability of typical database software tools to capture, store, manage, and analyze. Big data are information assets characterized by the three V's: volume, or the amount of data; variety, the number of data types; and velocity, the speed of processing. So big data is huge amount of data in a wide variety and processed very quickly. Processed and produced and processed quickly. Now, to these three, some would add two more: veracity, or trustworthiness; value, or benefit of worth. So big data has 5 characteristics: volume, variety, velocity, veracity, and value. So where do big data come from? First, from exhaust data. These are data passively collected from people's use of digital services such as mobile phones, financial transactions, or web searches. So for instance, when you Google something, well, Google remembers that and uses that to analyze you or to create a profile of you. So when we make phone calls, mobile phone company has a register of the number that we called, how long we talked. So all of these digital devices that we use actually constantly gather data about us. And so big data uses all of this exhaust data to create profiles of individuals. So for instance, when you go to Amazon or any e-commerce site, they usually know you, right? By that, because they know your past behavior and already tailor-fit services to you. So, but even if this is the first time that you go, for instance, to Amazon and look for a book, what Amazon software will do is that it will also give you recommendations, right, about similar books. And so you will notice they will say, those people who looked at this book also look at these books. And so they give you 3 or 4 other books that are similarly related. Or sometimes they say, those who purchased this book also purchased, right? So what they're using is how other people behave and then saying, you may be like them, so we're making you these recommendations. That's big data. You never gave them the information, or at least not knowingly, and yet they use that information to understand who you are and then make recommendations. Another way of doing it is, you may want to conduct this experiment, is that even if 2 or 3 different persons search for the same topic in Google, they will not get the same exact results. Okay? Because Google already takes into consideration your previous behavior to give you the results for the latest query. Since we all have different behaviors, then we will get different results. It's also just like your news feed in Facebook, right? Those are tailor-fitted for you, partly on the basis of what you liked before. So that's using exhaust data in the big data context. The other source of big data is what we call sensing data. These are actively collected data from sensors. So for instance, you will see that in smart cities, or increasingly a lot of cities, there are CCTV devices. Those devices collect information about traffic. They are also anti-crime devices. Some, for instance, have rainfall sensors so that they're able to monitor the amount of rainfall received. And of course, we know typically the sensors that register temperature. In agricultural settings, in rural settings, there are sensors in rivers so that they know the height of the water and even the flow of the water in the rivers. So all of this data, again, are collected and analyzed. So they are used, for instance, for forecasting weather. They are used for even anticipating events. So because sensors have become cheap and expected to become cheaper, then we will generate far more data from these devices in the future. The third source of data is digital content. So we produce content, right? So Facebook itself is just a platform. And as a platform, it's not particularly valuable. What is valuable is the content in Facebook, right? We go to Facebook because of the content produced by our friends. It's not necessarily because of content produced by others, other professional content providers. Unlike TV, for instance, in television, the content is professionally produced. In Facebook, it is really user-generated content. So all of this content that we produce, all the pictures that we post, all the video that we post, are analyzed, right? And are used, again, to create profiles of individuals and are used to understand the customer better in a business context so that better decisions are made. From big data, we now go to real-time data, right? So real-time data is data delivered immediately after collection. Now, sometimes they have a less strict definition of data, of real-time data, and that is data produced and made available in a relatively short and relevant period of time. Specifically, data made available within a time frame that allows action to be taken in response. So sometimes big data takes time because you still have to process the data, but real-time data is that which we get immediately. So again, same sources for data: social media feeds, tweets, satellite imagery, sensor-monitored rainfall and flood levels, as well as smartphone location data. So for instance, there is an application that looks at tweets, that monitors tweets, and looks for specific words. And when those specific words come up frequently, they know that there is going to be an event. So it could be flooding, it could be rainfall, but tweets, in a sense, is used to anticipate as an early warning device. So why is this interesting? Again, it's because we can monitor events on a daily basis, if not hourly basis. Today, government tracks activities and progress on a quarterly basis, and that's already fast. Sometimes we monitor on a semestral or a yearly basis. If we have real-time data, we can monitor events as they happen, and we can adjust our response commensurately. There is also small data. If there is big data, there must be small data. And what is small data? It's the human-centric alternative to big data. Small data sets that are capable of impacting decisions in the present. Another definition is data in a volume and format that makes it accessible, informative, and actionable. Both big and small data are collected and processed to gain insights. However, if we rely on sensors and tweets and social media posts for big data, small data relies on a mix of keen observation of small samples and applied intuition. Some say small data was previously known simply as data. What we used to call data is now called small data, largely because we want to distinguish between data and big data. Finally, the fifth source for data for government is called citizen-generated data. So, citizen-generated data are data that people or their organizations produce or directly monitor, demand, or drive change on issues that affect them. A good example is Ushahidi, Haiti. Remember the big earthquake that leveled Haiti? They use a crisis map to report incidents during, particularly after the earthquake. So the name of the crisis map is Ushahidi. So essentially what people were doing was reporting their situation. And if they needed help, if they were all right, or if somebody else needed help. So what is interesting about Ushahidi Haiti is that it transformed victims into active participants in their own rescue and rehabilitation. Victims were no longer waiting for help to arrive. Victims were actively telling first responders where they are or where their friends are and where help is needed. So it is a great way to get an immediate overview of the on-the-ground situation. And they were doing this through tweets, through SMS, tweets, and even email. One of the issues facing women today is harassment on the street. Right? So men make offensive remarks, hat calls, right? And generally be obnoxious when they see women on the street. So this is a reality also in Cairo. And so women have taken one step in order to help themselves on this issue. They've done a sexual harassment map of Cairo. Again, this is a digital map. And people, and women in particular, can report incidents where they were harassed on the street. So the value of that is that women know where there's a preponderance of harassment on the street, and if they're able to, may be able to avoid those streets. The other interesting thing about this harass map, is what it's called, is that they also registered where other people helped them. So you get not only idea of the intensity of harassment, but also when community comes and help in that situation. So again, this is citizens creating data for issues that they feel closest to, but somehow government has not provided for. The other incidence of citizen-generated data is that citizens have created an air quality measure or an air quality map of Beijing. And in Tanzania, they have citizens have water point statuses. So what is interesting about this is that you actually get data where you don't have data. Right? So we said that despite efforts at official statistics to be comprehensive, there's still issues about communities do not have data. So citizens create data on issues that most affect them, where they think government must pay attention and act.